Berlin, a divided city at the center of a divided continent. For 25 years, both the symbol and barometer of the Cold War. If this is to melt, if there is to be a détente, it will start here. Now a door has been opened, and West German Chancellor Willy Brandt expresses a cautious hope.
The character of the discussions have changed, and step by step one is entering into limited but still important areas of cooperation.
Brandt's negotiations with East Germany and its Soviet masters have led to relaxations in the rigid division of Berlin in return for recognition that Eastern Europe's massive power is here to stay. Since the ancient Greeks laid the foundations of what later became European civilization, the tribes, nations, kingdoms, and imperial powers of Europe have been fighting each other with stupefying regularity and devastating effect. The continent that gave the world a great religion, much of its philosophy, art, and industrial impetus, also tended to drag the rest of the world into war. A place of great beauty, towering geography, lofty ideals, and mountainous slag heaps, Europe fought itself to exhaustion in World War II. But with the atomic bomb and the jet age came a common European desire to end the headlong flight to mutual ruin, a call for unity transcending national interest. For Europe had to face a new threat, this time from the East, which would again upset its dream of peace and stability. All the paraphernalia of military preparedness had to be reassembled and strengthened, since the Soviet Union, half Europe, was looking over its Iron Curtain at the rest with covetous eyes. Thus, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization was born to patrol and defend the crude frontier dividing Europe, now lined by radar stations from Norway to Turkey. But the most effective weapon of all is in Brussels, the unified NATO command, linking the armed forces of 14 nations under the authority of a civilian political council. These men represent forces which alone are impotent, but united protect Europe. Throughout the bleak years of the Cold War, both East and West strained to produce bigger, better, faster, more deadly, and more stealthy instruments of destruction, and carried the confrontation to the depths beneath the polar ice cap. On the surface, the political ice appeared to be melting when the two Germanys and the Soviet Union began talking realistically about Europe. And, despite a measure of hope, realism prevails. Vigilance continues, and with good reason. A global game of blind man's buff reveals that the Soviet Union and its Warsaw Pact allies deploy vastly superior forces. At sea, Soviet submarine strength outnumbers NATO's by more than a third. To counter them, NATO, and notably the British, have developed highly sophisticated submarine detection and attack systems.
Bad man, bad man.
But recently, even this effort was torpedoed when a British naval lieutenant was discovered to have sold the secrets of such weapons, as well as NATO's strategic naval plans, to the Soviet embassy in London. Amid this continual shift of advantage, the struggle goes on. And always, NATO's ultimate aim is to neutralize the threat of Soviet supremacy, should the theory of warfare ever become fact. In furtherance of this aim, the borders between NATO countries are disregarded. Yet this mobility of NATO's armies cannot disguise the fact that in terms of sheer firepower, they are inferior to those of the Warsaw Pact. For example, estimates put Soviet armored strength at 22,000 tanks against NATO's 8,000. Continual watchfulness is the first answer to those kinds of odds. The second answer is to plan for the worst, to weigh chances, and be prepared to mobilize at the first sign of any change in the pattern of power. A full-scale alert could activate squadrons from as far apart as Canada and... But in numbers of tactical aircraft readily available, NATO is once again on the light end of the scale. Such has been the build-up by Warsaw Pact countries that in the air for Europe, they can muster an enormous air fleet of over 5,300 aircraft, against which NATO could send up only 2,800. There are about 1 million NATO troops on readiness in Europe. Against them are some 1,350,000. 61 divisions against 95. Nevertheless, NATO remains a potent force, which finds its strength in mobility and unity, plus the fact of American membership. While it seems likely that she may reduce her forces on the continent, commitment to Europe remains a cornerstone of American policy, as the separation of America from Europe must be one aim of Soviet policy. Meantime, the West is prepared to talk about a détente, which might allow weapons like these to stand down. And the starting point for any talk about the balance of power in Europe is here in Berlin. Any such discussions are going to be difficult. As West German Foreign Minister Walter Scheel points out, the words mean different things to different people.
This is a real difficult question. I found it extremely difficult to reach a normal term of speaking and talking to each other. It was really, to say, much more difficult to find this stage of normal conversation with one of my compatriots in the other part than with the Russians. But, you know, quarrels in one family are sometimes much deeper and much stronger than normal quarrels one has with others.
During the long, chilly years of the Cold War, the air was filled with insults and the rattle of sabers. Now there are more conciliatory sounds to be heard, including talk of peace and disarmament. But among the many bitter lessons Europe has learned in the past is that it does not pay to talk from a position of weakness, which is why NATO exists. But each new generation of Europeans hopes for a lifetime of peace and a chance of permanent happiness. And despite today's uncertain existence, perhaps that is what we can guarantee tomorrow's generation.